There we go. Okay, welcome everyone. And as always, thank you for coming along. Okay, so what are we talking about? Well, really, it's just a very simple suggestion in this meeting, and that is that there is no separation, that this is just wholeness already. And this wholeness that this is has never gone anywhere. It's never changed. It's never actually become something that's not whole. It never actually really becomes an individual or a separate entity in the first place, or to begin with. It is just wholeness, which doesn't change. Although wholeness can appear to change form or just sort of be anything or appear as anything. And it can apparently, reportedly, appear as an experience that there is separation, that there is something missing about this, that this isn't wholeness, that this does need something in order to make it complete, that this needs to become something else in order to be kind of fully realized. And that separate experience is what we would call the dream. That is a sort of dreamt reality, if you like. In some ways, what we talk about is two apparent realities in this meeting. And the first reality can't be spoken of, and the second reality isn't really happening. So nevertheless, we seem to talk about these two things. And the first reality, what we could call the natural reality, is just this wholeness, just simply as it is, just naturally being itself. It's unknowable. It's completely without meaning, direction, or purpose. It's just what apparently is, just this, just completely naturally itself. But then there is another apparent reality, an artificial reality, if you like, which is what seemingly happens with this sort of arising of this sense to be a person, or a sense to be a someone, an individual, a me. And this seems to arise sort of very early on, and uniquely in the human being. It seems to arise very early on for the human being and uniquely to the human being. And it's this sense, this sort of this contracted limited sense of being, which seems to give rise to this whole sense of being a person, or of a personal identity. And as this arises, it's almost as though the wholeness that this is somehow lost or overlooked. So this me, or this individual, then seems to live its whole apparent life in this sort of artificial reality where there is apparently separation. And what seems to be a part of that separate experience is that there's also something lost or missing about this appearance. There's something incomplete about this. So then the seeming response to that, in the dream of the individual, of course, is to then go looking for something which is going to make this feel whole and complete. And that's what we would call seeking. So the seeking is just a response to this sense that wholeness has been lost. And the whole time that that's going on, it seems to cover over what we could call this sort of natural reality, which, as I was just describing, which is just this wholeness as it naturally is. But the whole time there is this apparent individual, who lives in this apparent artificial reality of separation, of lost, of need, of seeking. It's all the same energy. Then it just seems that the natural reality that this is, or the naturalness that this is just not seen. It's sort of denied and pushed away. But that whole thing is an illusion. It's an illusory experience. From within the experience for the individual, it feels absolutely real. I am here, I am a someone, this is how it feels for the individual. And I know this because this is my experience. This is how it seems to be. That's how it feels. So this apparent separation, this apparent sense to be an individual is something actually intrinsically felt to be a part of the experience of what's happening. So it's nothing to do with a kind of a thought or a belief or something like that. It's nothing to do with a sort of being a true self or a false self or anything like that. That whole thing is illusory. But it does seem that from within the illusion or from within the dream of the individual, that the natural reality is somehow lost or hidden. And really, very simply, the suggestion is that no, it's not. The message is no, it's not. This is wholeness. This is and always has been wholeness, and not just this wholeness. The wholeness that this is already is just in that sense always available. It hasn't gone anywhere. And on some level, that can be heard, not by the individual who's living in this apparent artificial separate reality never hears that. It can never hear that, but something can hear that on a sort of deeper energetic level. And then it can just be that the whole illusion is seen as not being real. It's not seen by someone. There isn't someone or something that sees that as the illusion. It's just simply that it isn't there. And never was there. It was never really existing at all, which sounds like a paradox, but actually in the end, there isn't a paradox. It's just how it naturally is. And even that appearance of this artificial separate reality was just wholeness appearing as this sense of being an individual living in a separate reality. It was never real. There is no separation and there is no individual. So we can talk about that. So feel free to ask questions on or comment on what was said, or type in the chat if you wish. Message in the chat. Hi, Neil. With toddlers, it is important for them to have a routine in an unpredictable world. Do we teach an illusion? I feel it is an important thing for children to have. Yeah, sure. So if you're talking about the illusion to be someone, there is only one illusion, and that's I am. I am a someone. The individual is the only illusion. And that can't be taught. It just seems to naturally arise with this sense of a sort of a contracted sense of something being here. And then what then does happen for the toddler is it then seemingly just sort of starts to develop from there and evolve from there. And obviously the toddler then learns to take on all sorts of ideas and things that it learns, and which it sort of adds to itself in that way. And then from those sorts of experiences, it then begins to form a kind of a personal identity around this sort of contracted energy. But that's the illusory experience. That is illusory, the personal identity, which isn't actually real. It isn't actually a person. It isn't actually an individual, an autonomous entity living in the body or as the body. It's just wholeness, just appearing as a body, as learning. Wholeness just appearing as a world. So we can't teach someone to be an individual, if that's what the question is asking. Although I would say that obviously the individual grows up in a world of other individuals or other bodies that believe they are an individual too. So that in a way that kind of goes on reinforcing this sense of being separate person, or this reinforcing this sense of a personal identity. And really, that's where the feeling of that this is unfulfilled begins. And then really, as that personal identity then goes on sort of forming, and that sort of energy becomes more and more sort of contracted as a response to the perceived world around it, which can feel threatening, becomes more and more contracted in that sense. And so it kind of can sort of have that impression of just sort of reinforcing that sort of separate sense of self or personal identity. Comments in the chat, you could simply call it a misunderstanding, perhaps. The individual as a misunderstanding, no, because it's nothing to do with an understanding. It's something that seems to be felt. It seems to be, for the individual, a lived experience. So it's not that the individual, it's not that someone who is an individual is just misunderstanding something, because in that sense, of course, then there could be just a new understanding, which could then correct that misunderstanding in some way. No, it's much deeper than that. It's energetic, it's a sense. It's really just sort of fingernails to toenails, just sense, lived experience, reality for the individual, of just being a someone. And it is in this being a someone that the wholeness is seemingly lost, but only seemingly. It isn't lost. It isn't really lost, of course. It doesn't actually go anywhere. Another question in the chat. I've heard it described as a deliberate error of the divine, whatever that may be. Okay, well, I'm not sure who described it in that way, no. No. Because that would then say that this has some sort of intelligence or consciousness where it's deliberately making mistakes to try and teach us something. That sounds like some of those sort of stories that I used to listen to about consciousness and all of that kind of thing. No. This is completely blind. It's completely oblivious to itself. There's nothing behind it. There's nothing steering this. It's just completely wild and free in that sense. There's nothing behind it. It's not going somewhere, hasn't come from somewhere. So it has no intention at all. And because it isn't going somewhere, then it just naturally has no purpose or meaning. And I will just come to this one first, because it's the same person. That's impossible to comprehend for the me or the mind. Well, yes, of course. Yeah, there's just no comprehension of this. No, of course not. No. But this isn't speaking to the me or to the mind. There's nothing here for the me or for the mind. There's nothing really for the mind or the me to engage with even here. It's just I've heard it called an empty shop. It's just completely empty. There is absolutely nothing on offer, because what's truly longed for is just always this. And another question in the chat. Are you saying there are no individuals? Well, of course, yeah. Of course. Yeah. In fact, that's all the message is saying. Yeah, it's an illusion. It's a dream. Pick whichever word you like.
Hi, Neil.
Hello.
Yeah, I didn't mean individuals in the psychological sense, like a separate me. I meant physically. Are you saying there are no individuals?
There's just no individuals, full stop.
Well, what about bodies? Are there no bodies?
Well, apparently there are bodies. There is an appearance of bodies, yes. But
Well,
there's no one in them, or no one being the body.
Yeah, that's closer to what I was getting at.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, just to come back to something you said earlier, and I think we've talked about this before. The me, the sense of being a person, isn't psychological. It can seemingly arise in the psychology, but it's actually I would say it's more physical in that sense. It's something actually felt. It's this sort of contracted energy which seems to create an impression of a position or of a location, which then sort of evolves into this sense of the person.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think we talked about this last time, I'm pretty sure. I'm vaguely recollecting. And then the psychology can then seemingly respond to that. I.e., there can be thoughts about being a me. There can be sort of, well, I feel like a me, feelings about being a me. This sense of being a person claims ownership of emotions and feelings and claims ownership of the body in its entirety. But it seemingly lives throughout the whole body.
I think I've heard it said that this development begins to happen around the age of 3, something like that.
I would say it's probably earlier, although there are no rules. It's the first thing that's known. A knowing arises, a self-awareness arises in the body as the first thing known. Really not much more than a baby, I would say.
Okay, but what tree I'm barking on is there are bodies.
There are apparent bodies, yeah.
Yes, yes.
And some bodies may be having the illusory experience that they are a someone.
This can be seen through, though, can't it?
Well, no one sees through it, but this illusion can seemingly fall away. Yeah. But the falling away of the illusion is the recognition that the illusion was never happening. That's what's meant by an illusion. So it isn't like there is an illusion happening. It's that the individual is an illusion. As in, it's not really happening. I once found a lovely definition, which I've said a few times, but I'll say it again. It was in the Cambridge English Dictionary when I was writing my book. It was a definition of an illusion, which was it described an illusion as an experience that deceives by creating a false or misleading impression of reality. In other words, it's an apparent experience which creates this false impression or this artificial, seemingly artificial reality. The reality where there is someone at the center of this having an experience of themselves and their lives and everything else.
Because another definition of illusion is that it's something that it just doesn't appear to be what it is. It appears to be something other than what it is. It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist altogether.
Right. Well, for the individual, it feels real. But when the individual dies, it's just obvious that it just never was real. There was never a real individual existing at all, not in any form, not even as an illusion. You can't tell an individual that.
Hey Neil.
Hello.
Could you say something about this location? That's something that that somehow intrigues me, because there is the sense that before I somehow didn't quite feel in the body. Now I feel more like in the center of the body. But when you say this whole thing of no location.
Well, what seems to happen is that there seems to be a contracted energy in the body which seems to create this impression of a location. It's just a sort of an energetic tension, if you like.
Yeah.
And I've lost you. I'm just trying to find you again. Oh, well.
Yeah.
And this seems to create the impression of there being something here, a sort of an energetic center in a way, from which the whole kind of individual, the whole evolution of the individual sort of begins with this sort of contraction in the body, this sort of sense of something being here. And then what can happen is energetically that can just fall away, and then it just sort of seems to take the whole kind of personal identity with it as well. The whole sense of a location or a position seems to melt away with this sort of contracted energy, giving this sort of sense or impression of a something here as a location or as a position. And I seem to touch the chest when I do it. It was sort of surprising how much, here, I can't speak for anyone else, so to speak, but it was surprising how much tension was in the chest, actually. and just no idea it's there. There's just no way to know that the individual you can't feel your way to that contraction because you are that contraction.
Yeah.
So you can't get out of that to try and find what that is. So it's not like one can start doing energy work or yoga or something to try and relax the contraction. It's not like that at all. It's I talked about it as being something physical. It's not. It's sort of almost metaphysical in a way, without sounding spooky or anything like that, because it isn't. It's just very natural, actually. And the seeming falling away is also very natural as well. But yeah, there was just so much. It actually felt like my heart was melting. I can't really, almost like, I don't know if you've ever been brokenhearted, you know, like when you're a teenager and you've been in love and there's that feeling of just being so in love with someone that it
Constantly.
breaks your heart.
It's
It's
a
almost
chronic,
like that, but then it's just
chronic,
you
yeah.
know, just a melting. I can't. I mean, I'm doing my best for you. I just can't really describe how that is. It's you know. and
But
but it's just something else I would say about that. The weird thing is that sort of contractedness seems to appear in everything else. So it appears in the trees and the buildings, it appears in the table, the laptop, it appears in the glasses and the microphone. Everything appears as that sort of solid contractedness in that way. And the funny thing is, as that tension melts away, it's sort of everything, it melts away in everything else as well. So it seems to have the effect of everything else just opening up, but it isn't really like that. It's just sort of how it naturally is. It's just always been experienced from this sort of contracted state.
But what in your case then, when that melted, what then happened to the sense of being located?
Oh, well, there just wasn't one. It was just here that just seemingly completely melted away. However, the body seems to automatically know where it is. The brain seems to automatically know where it is. If I was sitting on a bus and this nose was itching, I wouldn't start scratching a nose over here somewhere. You know, I can. The body seems to know where it is. This doesn't seem to bump into walls or trip up steps, and it seems to be able to get in a car and drive and do a 3-point turn and reverse park if it needs to. It seems to be, you know, throw and catch a ball. It seems to be able to navigate this sort of perceived environment or this apparent world around it in a way. But that is just instinctive, automatic, how it is. But the unbelievable part of that is I can't see you, but that's exactly how it is there too. That's what's happening there too. There is just a body, just as I was just describing, just appearing to react and respond and move and do things. That's all it is. It's just in that body, there may just be this sense that there is someone existing in the body or as the body, who is then sort of everything else that isn't the body is not me kind of thing. And there is that separateness in that sense.
What I feel is that there's some feeling of responsibility over the body.
Yes, that's
but
how
do
it
you
is.
have that?
Well, no, of course not. No. This is just completely empty. There may be a sense of something being responsible for the body there, but that's the illusion. That's illusory. And can only tell about that is it just seems real for the individual when it's not there anymore. It's just obvious. That was never the case. The body just does stuff. But then when there is an individual, it just claims everything the body does as I did that. That was me.
good. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Next question. Hi, Neil. How rare is it for the illusion to fall away? And do you get many people ringing you to report that it's all over now? Many thanks. No, I've not had anyone ring me and report that yet. But I'm not very well known. I'm not very famous, you know. No, but I speak to other speakers who've had that phone call from time to time. Yeah, and certainly Jim had that phone call from me at one point. Although I hadn't, it wasn't all over at that point. I was dying, but I hadn't died at that point. There was still something here trying to work out what was going on, because everything had just got turned upside down and shaken energetically. What I would say to that, be a little bit controversial, is there does seem to be more and more people coming forward and speaking on YouTube and seemingly speaking in this way. But I think it's still rare to hear a clear message coming from no thing. I think that's still quite rare. I would say there's a dozen, maybe, people on YouTube that I'm aware of. And next question. Hi, Neil. What I meant to ask about having a routine, is that a natural thing for a human being, or is it only an illusion or a need of the individual? So again, the only illusion is that there is an individual. Everything else is just what apparently happens. So if there is a body responding to a routine of some kind, then that's just what apparently happens. The suggestion is there's just no one in the body doing that, or making that happen, or making that work. If there is a sense to be someone or a person or a me, if there is a me in the body, then it will just claim that for itself as that's me. I'm doing that. This is my routine. I've decided to have a routine in my life because I will feel better for it. But what will also happen, if there is a sense to be a me in the body, is then the me will then look for freedom in that routine. It will want that routine in place because it feels like it's going to get something from that, as in it's going to in some way benefit itself, or it's going to benefit its experience in some way, be a positive thing, and then that will be better. And I kind of think, hi there, I'll come to you in just a moment. Just to add to that, just to finish off, I kind of think the need for a routine is something that the individual would need as a way to feel that it is still in control of its life, that it is still the boss making decisions, having a routine, choosing to do these things or not. If there is no individual and then there is just a routine that naturally happens, then that's just what naturally happens. There's no claiming of that, and there is no need for anything out of that at all, because everything is already absolutely whole as it already is, however it appears to be. Okay, hello.
Hi, Neil.
Hi.
I was just wondering if there can be a sense of grief associated with the apparent falling away
No.
of self.
Well, that wasn't here. No.
Mm.
A grief for whom or for what?
For the loss, for the loss of.
But nothing's lost.
Yes.
There isn't
yes, but
someone lost.
the apparent loss. Yeah.
Well, what's apparent is that there is nothing lost. There is no person already. So there wouldn't be a grieving for, Neil, who was lost. It turns out that Neil was never there. I would say that there was some reflecting on all of the years spent seeking.
Yeah, I
in a
was
way.
thinking about loved ones, like children, parents, the loss, or if there would be a feeling of.
Well, again, it's the same thing really, because it's just when there is no one, there just is no one. There's no one in parents and loved ones. So all of that sort of thing continues just as it was. Because there really isn't a real someone who is dying or being lost. I know it sounds a bit dramatic to say when the individual dies, but no, the death of the individual is that there just is no individual.
Thank you.
Okay. And oh, did I do that one? Yep. Next question in the chat. So is the problem the mind, because the mind wants to own experience? Mind is the physical manifestation of that contracted energy in the body, creating the impression of a center in the mental sense. That's the dream. And next question. Oh, there we are. Can you account for the supposed mixed signals coming from some apparent speakers? Yes, very easily. There's still someone there who perhaps just has some clarity on the concepts of what's being spoken about. Yeah. And yeah, they're just really sort of sharing from that kind of clarity on the concepts. There may have even been some sort of shift or awakening, I don't know, or or sort of a deeper, more profound clarity conceptually. But my sense with some, and that's always been the case, it's not new, there are plenty of people talking and apparently talking about non-duality. And I think that just this sort of communication has just become more present on YouTube and things like that. So I think probably the people who were kind of already speaking about non-duality as some kind of realization or attainment have just sort of started to incorporate some of the lingo into their speak, is my impression. But then again, I think there are other speakers who are also speaking, talking about things like this is just being unknowing, but my sense is that there is still an experience happening there in some cases where there is something which is having an experience of being in a mystery, or as having an experience of something that is unknowing. There's just nothing left in the end, nothing to be experienced as an unknowing or as a mystery. But what I would also say to that, if there is a resonance with this sort of communication, then that will probably be sensed energetically. It sort of comes down to something energetic. But when I was a seeker and I was listening to different sort of speakers, once I cottoned onto this whole non-duality game, there were some speakers where there was just a clear resonance with the communication, and there were some other speakers who kind of said some of the same sort of stuff, but it was just a very different feeling, I thought, coming from the message energetically. And yes, mixed signals certainly keep the seeker busy. They keep the speaker busy too, of course. Yeah. It's good to keep busy. Keep on keeping on. That's what my old nanny used to say. Well, just keep on keeping on. This is it. You're sitting in it, you're breathing it, you're thinking it. It's just everything already. Does anything change after a falling away? No. But it is dramatically different. But nothing's changed. So, preempting the next question, and that's because for the individual, life seems to be being experienced from this very contracted, limited sense of being. Just feels like Jim Newman used to call it, I don't think he does anymore, but he used to call it like a straitjacket. So in that sense, it's very different. This just open, spacious, just timeless, just can't even describe it, and just can't even say that. But it is everything. Is it just everything what is without putting a meaning or thoughts to it? Well, everything would also be what is appearing as putting meanings and thoughts to it. You can't say it's one thing, that it is a certain way, which would then mean there's a way that it isn't. You can't. You just cannot quantify this in any way. As soon as there is a saying that it is one way, then that's suggesting there is a way that it isn't. It's not. It's unconditionally free. It's unconditional wholeness. It is everything, even appearing as that apparent individual or that contracted, limited, illusory experience. And a new question, but suffering no longer has anything to cling to. It depends what you mean by suffering. If you mean a suffering, the seeking and the individual, that's kind of the existential suffering, then of course, no, then there is just no suffering in that sense. Oh, mental anguish. Well, I imagine there could be. I think if someone was torturing this and chopping off my finger inch by inch, then yes, there might be anguish. Yeah, yeah, quite possibly would be anguish in that sense. But I think really where the question's coming from is where this sort of anguish at the individual experiences this whole time, which is just sort of seems to go with the neuroticism that seems to go with the story of I am. Because it just feels unsatisfactory and that something's missing, and it's almost like like a splinter, that you can't get to. What is it? So there can just be that kind of Chinese water torture in that sense of just that constant need, that constant feeling of that there is something existing which is unfulfilled. Next question. So no need to change anything. Nothing ever changes. There's just nothing appearing as everything, however that appears, even if that appears as an apparent change. But there is no need to change anything because there is no one who could change anything. That's the worst part to that. So this isn't about there being a realization that there's nothing to change. No, it's that there is nothing which could change what's happening. There is no one. And there's a hand up somewhere. Would you like to just come in?
Yes. Hi, Neil.
Hi there.
There is this famous sentence: "All there is what's happening."
Mm.
This word "happening" kind of point to movement or something like time. There's time in it, or at least for me, like happening.
Yeah. Which
Would
is
it-
why
would it be
sometimes
more
we have to
accurate to
say
say-
what's apparently happening.
Would it be more accurate to say all there is what's appearing?
Yeah,
as
you can say that.
as an immediate appearance. That's it, as an appearance.
It's just what appears to be happening. Yeah. Or what's
Because now,
apparently
if
happening.
if I'm moving my hand, eventually it's like a series of it's not moving, right? I mean,
Well, it's an appearance of movement. It's appearing to move. But
yes,
this
but
isn't moving. It's not going somewhere. This isn't moving through space and time. Some astrologers would argue with that, of course.
but the hand is apparently moving.
Well, apparently it's moving. Yeah, there's apparent
Yeah,
movement.
but
Yeah.
and then what does nothing is happening means in that context?
Well, I'm afraid it means that this is nothing appearing as movement.
Okay.
That doesn't help, does
So
it?
no. So nothing is happening.
Nothing. This is nothing
It's
happening.
also like,
This
yeah,
is nothing
okay.
happening. This is nothing happening. This is nothing happening. This is nothing happening.
All right.
Rubbing your forehead is nothing happening.
But it's appearing to happen.
It's just what's appearing to happen. But what is appearing is nothing appearing as
Okay.
whatever is
Yeah.
appearing to happen.
Yeah.
As in, it's empty. There's nothing in it.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
no substance to it. There's nothing. So it's empty. There's just nothing in it at all. Nothing behind it. Nothing steering it.
Nice. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks. And Freddie, come on in. You need to unmute yourself, Freddie.
I'm
There you go.
I'm trying to catch you out here.
Oh, right. Okay.
I take it you still have memories.
There are memories. Yes.
Yeah,
I don't have
but-
memories.
Ah, right. But you say there's nothing in there.
No.
It would suggest there is something in there if you have memories.
But there's nothing in there either. Well,
Right.
there is nothing existing here that is owning the memories as a personal experience.
Mhm.
Memories just appear to happen.
Okay.
And
Just
memories
like
are also no thing appearing as memories.
Just like everything else.
Of course, yeah. Everything is
mm,
just an
mm.
appearance. Yeah.
Thank
It's
you.
just what apparently happens. But for the individual, let's just be clear about this. For the individual, memories are my memories, and they're real, and that's evidence that there was a past. This is my life. This is my world. This is my body, and that seems to be experienced for the individual as an actuality, as a real reality. Which is why I started off the talk by talking about that, describing that, just to get a feel of it as a concept, as a kind of an artificial reality, as if it's not really, that's not really how this is, apparently.
Okay, so there's nothing personal even about memories.
Well, there's no person. No, of course not. No. Memories are just memories of an apparent past. But
Well,
they are just arising in this as well, of course.
yeah,
So memories are timeless too.
but for the person who would perhaps before this is seen through this illusion that you speak about, they would believe that they were personal, the memories.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what you're saying
apparently.
is they're not personal. I suppose like nothing else is personal either.
Well, what's being said is that there is no person. Only as an illusion, and it only as an illusion for the individual. From here, there is no illusion. There's no illusion happening there. But there may be an illusion that there is someone there.
Hey, Neil.
Hello.
So it basically feels like on these sharings that as a kid you believe in Santa Claus, and then when you find out Santa Claus doesn't exist, you cry. Some people didn't have to go through that, but it's actually the me crying, and then the me chases.
I don't roll with that whole Santa Claus analogy, I'm afraid, because that sounds to me like it's saying the individual is a belief. Kids believe in Santa Claus. They're not experiencing Santa Claus. I think the sense to be someone it's energetic. It's much more an apparent, seemingly lived reality for the individual. It just simply isn't about a belief and then suddenly just not believing there is someone.
So it's not like a little I thought, and then that I thought is all the holds all the other thoughts.
Not at all. No. Thoughts have nothing to do with it at all. No, there may be. So there is a sense that there is a sort of an energy which arises, which gives this sense to be a someone, an individual or a me. Once that sort of arises, then there may be thoughts about that. There may be beliefs about that, but the thoughts are sort of converging. They're not creating. Thoughts are just really information, almost like a kind of an internal intranet of just information. It's just information. It's just reporting on what's arising or what's appearing to happen. So if there is apparently a me there, then there will just be thoughts sort of reporting on that. Well, there is this me thing going on.
So when seeing is happening from there, seeing's taking place. Is that seeing a little altered than before seeing? Is there a little energetic something that they, I've always heard the freshness, aliveness. Is it 24/7?
how to describe? So here it was as though this sort of contractedness, or this sort of cloud of knowing, seemed to in some way create almost like a kind of a veil over everything, you know, senses, touch and sight, everything. In fact, I was talking about this with someone earlier, and I've actually no idea if this is the case in some others, I don't know, but it was as though the fingertips were suddenly very sensitive, and smell was suddenly very sensitive. I couldn't this didn't like strong smells and couldn't eat strong flavors for a while, and it was sort of quite difficult to watch TV for a while. I mean, that was just here because it just seemed so sort of intense. It's just almost as though everything is just being experienced as from this sort of, or as this sort of contracted sense. And so it's almost like the senses are contracted too, in that sort of, that's a story then.
Okay, thanks, Neil.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, Neil.
Hello.
I was going to ask you,
Yeah.
Kind of, I don't know if I'm being repetitious, but when the contraction seems to fall away, is there like a sense of, or a felt sense of freedom and joy associated with that, or is that just also the individual?
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, it can be. Yeah. Yeah, because, you know, life was appearing in this very sort of contracted, limited way. Yeah, for the individual, everything appears as this sort of contracted, limited sense. Yeah, in a way.
And so that felt sense of joy or freedom is not the self. It's not the self or the individual.
No, of course not. No. Well, I mean, the apparent self doesn't do anything. Actually, it doesn't create feelings or thoughts. Or it was like I was talking to the gentleman earlier. It doesn't actually do anything at all. Just for the individual, it's just seemingly there. That's just seemingly how it is for the individual. But no, and that's what I was talking about earlier about there being quite a dramatic difference in a way from this sort of contracted sense of beingness, limited, contracted sense of beingness, to boundlessness.
Yes, there seems to be like you were saying, you know, like an expansion almost, and maybe this is a me interpreting it like the heart opening.
Yeah, in some ways. Yeah, in some ways. Yeah, although I mean, you really just can't really be that specific about it in that way. Yeah, it does. It does seem as though this sort of, as this contraction or this tension falls away, that is felt. That is apparently felt. That apparently happens. What then is recognized in that is that there was never any individual existing with that.
Yeah. So it sort of feels like well, the heart opening, of course, feels like ecstasy and joy and freedom, and but I'm afraid that it's a trap, you know.
Beginning to sound a bit like a story.
Yes.
What you're saying here, I mean, really, all we're talking about all we're talking about, really, if we come back down to it, is this apparent tension in the body, which creates this sort of impression that there is something here existing that is contracted and limited, and that can seemingly melt away.
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. Which is why the the apparent individual can't do anything about it, or the mind can't do anything about this apparent energy, because it's nothing to do with the mind. It's not being created by the mind. It's not even there in that sense. But to be clear about this, just to confuse everyone, that apparent contraction isn't separate. It's boundlessness appearing as an apparent contractedness.
So you would say that the heart opening or the apparent falling away of the contractedness.
It does seem that the contraction, it's sort of more here in a way. So
yeah, it feels that way.
It's not, but again, it appears in everything. It just seems to be in everything. But it's almost as if it has a center, sort of somewhere here, almost. I don't know.
Thank you.
Okay. And the funny thing is, it's just suddenly not there. It's just, and yeah, it's yeah, like I was sort of trying to describe.
Well, it feels kind of like a process almost, but yet
I know,
it isn't.
yeah. I know it can sound like that, yeah. But that's not an individual, and there is nothing which can sort of make that happen, if you see what I mean. But of course, also that is still boundlessness appearing as this apparent tension or contraction.
Yes.
Now everyone wants to get rid of their contraction, I understand, but it's not, it really isn't about them. It's just not about a something, or and there doesn't have to be a melting away or a falling away of anything for there to be nothing appearing as everything, because that is already the case. If there's nothing appearing as a contractedness, then that's what's happening. If it's nothing appearing as a whatever is appearing, then that's just what's appearing. That's just what's happening. And that is all of it already unconditionally free.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Oh, someone in the waiting room. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I'll just stop the recording, but I'll stick around for a few minutes if anyone else just wants to ask something at all. Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming.